The Valorian Empire was one of the oldest civilizations in the known galaxy. For 10,000 years, they had ruled over 40 star systems. Their cities were made of living crystal that sang in the wind. Their people were tall and graceful, with silver skin and eyes that glowed like distant stars. The Valorians were proud of many things. They were proud of their long lives. Most Valorians lived for 800 years. They were proud of their beautiful art and music. But most of all, they were proud of their psychic abilities. Every Valorian could touch what they called the mind stream, a river of thoughts and emotions that connected all living things. They believed this gift made them superior to all other species. Humans had arrived in the galactic community only 200 years ago. To the ancient Valorians, humans were like children who had just learned to walk. They lived short lives, barely a century if they were lucky. They could not touch the mind stream. They could not feel the emotions of others or speak without words. The Valorians saw humans as useful workers and decent soldiers, but nothing more. They were primitives, savages who had somehow learned to build starships. This was what Princess Elindra had been taught since birth. Princess Elindra was the youngest daughter of Emperor Valoris XII. She had just turned 16 cycles old, still a child by Valorian standards, though she would never admit it. She had her father's silver hair and her mother's proud bearing. She was beautiful, intelligent, and absolutely convinced of her own importance. She was also, though she did not know it, in terrible danger. On the morning that would change her life, Elindra was summoned to her father's throne room. The emperor sat upon a chair carved from a single massive crystal, and beside him stood the captain of the royal guard and 3 members of the High Council. "My daughter," the emperor said, his voice formal and cold as always, "the council has selected your new personal guardian." Elindra straightened with excitement. She had been requesting a personal guardian for 2 years now. She had dreamed of having a Valorian knight, one of the legendary psychic warriors who could stop a person's heart with a thought. Or perhaps a Thessian warrior, 8 feet tall with 4 arms and skin like iron. The doors to the throne room opened. A human walked in. Elindra felt her excitement die like a candle in a storm. The human was ordinary. That was the worst part. He was not tall, barely 6 feet. His hair was dark brown, cut short in military fashion. His face was plain, with a strong jaw and tired eyes the color of mud. He wore the standard armor of the Galactic Coalition's Human Protection Corps, black and gray, functional but not elegant. He walked to the center of the room and bowed once, properly but without flair. "Sergeant Marcus Cole, reporting for duty, Your Imperial Majesty." His voice was calm and professional. Boring, Elindra thought. "Father," she said, not even trying to hide her displeasure. "What is this?" The Emperor's expression did not change. "Sergeant Cole has been assigned to your protection by the Galactic Coalition. He comes highly recommended. He is human." "Yes. I requested a Valorian knight. The Council has decided otherwise." The Emperor's tone made it clear that the discussion was over. "Sergeant Cole will begin his duties immediately. You will treat him with appropriate respect." Elindra wanted to argue more, but she knew that tone. She had pushed her father's patience to its limit. She turned to look at the human. He stood perfectly still, his face showing no emotion at all. He had certainly heard her complaints. He had certainly understood that she considered him beneath her. But he said nothing. His expression did not change. Pathetic, she thought. He does not even have the pride to be offended. "Fine," she said coldly. "He may follow me, but I want it noted that I consider this assignment an insult." She swept out of the throne room without another word, leaving the human to follow behind her like a servant. Marcus Cole followed the princess through the crystal corridors of the palace, maintaining the proper distance of exactly 4 paces behind her. His face remained calm, but his mind was working constantly, cataloging exits, noting guard positions, identifying potential threats. He had read the briefing files on Princess Aelindra, youngest daughter of the Emperor, intelligent but spoiled, known for her sharp tongue and quick temper, no combat training, minimal survival skills, and a belief in Valorian superiority that bordered on religious faith. The file had also contained a warning: the princess had driven away her last 3 guardians. One had requested reassignment after 2 weeks. Another had lasted a month. The third had simply disappeared, officially transferred, though rumors suggested a nervous breakdown. Marcus was not worried about any of that. He had served in 3 wars. He had fought against the Kreth Horde on the burning fields of Talos IV. He had survived the siege of New Melbourne, where 10,000 humans held a city against 1,000,000 enemies for 47 days. He had been shot, stabbed, burned, frozen, and left for dead on more occasions than he cared to remember. A teenage princess with a bad attitude was not going to break him. What concerned Marcus was something else entirely, something that was not in the official briefing files, but that his commander had shared with him privately before his departure. 3 assassination attempts had been made on Princess Aelindra's life in the past year. She did not know about any of them. The Hollow Syndicate, a criminal network that operated in the dark spaces between empires, wanted the princess. They wanted to use her as leverage against the Emperor, who had recently begun a campaign to destroy their operations in Valorian space. 3 attempts had been stopped. 3 teams of professional killers had been quietly eliminated before they could reach their target. But the Syndicate was patient, and they were determined. They would try again. That was why Marcus was here. Not because the Coalition wanted to honor the Valorians with a human guardian, not because there were no better options. Marcus was here because humans could not be touched by the mind stream. Every Valorian guardian was vulnerable. Their thoughts could be read. Their minds could be manipulated. The Syndicate had already compromised 2 members of the Palace Guard. Their psychic defenses had been slowly eroded over months until they became unwitting spies. But a human mind was different. The Valorians called it loud and chaotic, a storm of electrical activity that no psychic could read or control. To the mind stream, humans were invisible, which meant that Marcus Cole could not be compromised. He could not be bribed through mental manipulation. He could not be controlled. He could not even be detected by psychic surveillance. He was, in the most important way possible, the perfect guardian for a princess whose enemies used minds as weapons. Of course, the princess did not know any of this. She thought he was just a primitive soldier assigned to follow her around and embarrass her in front of her friends. Marcus was content to let her believe that. He had a job to do. Her opinion of him did not matter. Only her survival did. The first week was difficult. Princess Aelindra made it her mission to humiliate her human guardian at every opportunity. During meals, she made him stand in the corner like a servant while she ate with her friends and family. She introduced him to visitors as "my father's little joke" or "the Coalition's charity case." She tested his patience constantly. She would give him orders and then change them immediately. She would walk too fast, then complain when he followed too closely. She would stay up late to see if he would fall asleep, then mock him when his eyes showed tiredness in the morning. Marcus endured it all in silence. He never complained. He never showed anger or frustration. He simply did his job, standing guard outside her chambers at night, following her through the palace during the day, eating his meals alone in the servants' quarters. The princess found his silence infuriating. "Do you not have any pride?" she demanded one evening, after a particularly cruel joke at his expense during dinner. "Any self-respect?" Marcus looked at her calmly. "My pride is not my concern here, Your Highness. Your safety is." "Safety from what? We are in the most secure palace in the Empire." "Then my job should be easy," Marcus said simply. Alindra made a sound of disgust and walked away. She did not see the way Marcus's eyes moved to the shadows in the corridor behind her. She did not see him note the servant who had been watching them, a servant whose psychic signature, according to Marcus's classified scanner, had changed slightly in the last 3 days. She did not see him make a quiet report to Coalition intelligence that night, recommending that the servant be investigated. 3 days later, the servant was arrested. He had been recruited by the syndicate 2 months ago, slowly turned into a spy through careful psychic manipulation. He had been gathering information about the princess's schedule and habits. The 4th assassination attempt had been stopped before it could begin. Princess Alindra never knew it happened. And Marcus Cole did not tell her. 3 weeks passed, then 4, then 5. Marcus Cole continued his silent duty. He stood guard outside the princess's chambers each night. He followed her through the crystal corridors each day. He ate alone, spoke rarely, and never once complained about his treatment. Princess Alindra found this more irritating than anything else. She had expected the human to break. She had expected him to lose his temper, to shout at her, to demand respect. That would have given her a reason to have him removed. That would have proven that humans were the emotional primitives she believed them to be. But Marcus gave her nothing. He was like a stone wall. No matter how hard she pushed, he did not move. No matter what insults she threw, he did not react. His calm brown eyes watched everything, but his face showed nothing. It made Alindra feel strange, uncomfortable, almost guilty. She pushed that feeling away. She was a princess of the Valorian Empire. She did not feel guilty about how she treated a human servant. Instead, she decided to push harder. The Grand Feast of Illumination was one of the most important events in the Valorian calendar. Every year, nobles from across the empire gathered at the Crystal Palace to celebrate the founding of their civilization. There was music, dancing, and displays of psychic artistry that left visitors breathless. This year, Princess Alindra's cousins were attending. Prince Thovian was the eldest, nearly 200 years old, tall and cruel and always looking for entertainment. His younger siblings, twins named Kalara and Vorin, followed his lead in everything. Thovian had always intimidated Alindra. He was older, more powerful, and he had a way of making her feel like a child. She desperately wanted to impress him. When Thovian noticed Marcus standing quietly in the corner of the great hall, his eyes lit up with interest. "Cousin," he said, his voice carrying across the room, "is that a human wearing guardian armor?" The nearby nobles turned to look. Some of them laughed quietly. Alindra felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. "The coalition assigned him to me. I did not ask for it. How unfortunate for you." Thovian walked closer to Marcus, examining him like one might examine an unusual insect. "I have heard that humans are adequate fighters, strong for their size, persistent." He smiled coldly. "Like animals." Marcus did not react. His eyes remained fixed on a point in the middle distance, his posture perfectly still. "Does it speak?" Thovian asked. "Only when necessary," Alindra said. "Fascinating." Thovian circled Marcus slowly. "I have an idea, cousin. Let us have some entertainment. Let us see what your human guardian can do." Alindra hesitated. Something in her stomach felt wrong, but the entire court was watching now, hundreds of nobles, all waiting to see what she would do. If she refused, she would look weak. If she defended a human, she would be mocked for months. "What did you have in mind?" she asked. Thovian gestured to the center of the great hall. "A demonstration. We shall have him fight a training automaton. Let the court see the famous human combat abilities." His smile widened. "Set the automaton to children's difficulty. We would not want to embarrass him too badly." The court laughed. The sound echoed off the crystal walls like breaking glass. Elindra looked at Marcus. His expression had not changed, but she thought she saw something flicker in his eyes, just for a moment. "Sergeant Cole," she said, her voice formal and cold, "please demonstrate your combat abilities for the court." Marcus was silent for 3 heartbeats. Then he bowed his head slightly. "As you command, Your Highness." The training automaton was a machine designed to teach young Valorians basic self-defense. It was shaped like a tall humanoid, made of smooth silver metal with glowing blue sensors where eyes should be. At children's difficulty, it moved slowly and struck gently, barely a challenge for anyone with basic training. Marcus stood in the center of the hall. He had removed his outer armor, leaving only his simple black bodysuit. The nobles gathered in a circle around him, drinks in hand, treating this like entertainment at a party. The automaton activated. Its eyes glowed brighter. It moved toward Marcus with slow, predictable steps. What happened next shocked everyone. Marcus moved like water, like lightning, like nothing human should be able to move. He did not fight the automaton, he dismantled it. In 4 seconds, the machine was on the ground in pieces. Marcus had struck it 17 times in locations that would be fatal points on a living creature. His movements were efficient, brutal, and absolutely precise. The hall was silent. Then Thovian began to clap slowly. Impressive. It seems the human can break a children's toy. He looked at Elindra with amusement, though I notice his technique lacks any elegance. All power, no grace, typical of primitives. The court laughed again, though some of the laughter sounded forced. Several nobles were looking at Marcus with new expressions. Not respect exactly, but perhaps wariness. Elindra felt that strange feeling in her stomach again. She had just watched Marcus destroy a machine with terrifying skill, and yet she was still mocking him, still letting others mock him. "He let you," a small voice whispered in her mind. "He could have refused. He could have walked away, but he did exactly what you asked, even though it humiliated him." She pushed the voice away. Thovian was not finished. "I wonder," he said thoughtfully, "if humans truly feel pain the way higher beings do. I have read that their nervous systems are quite primitive." He pulled something from his belt, a small silver rod that hummed with energy. "This is a neural lash. It stimulates pain without causing physical damage." "Perhaps we should test whether that is enough." Everyone turned. Marcus had spoken. His voice was calm, but there was something in it that had not been there before, something hard. Thovian raised an eyebrow. "The primitive speaks. How amusing." "I am willing to demonstrate combat abilities," Marcus said. "I am willing to follow reasonable orders from my assigned charge. I am not willing to be tortured for entertainment." The hall went completely silent. No one spoke to Prince Thovian that way. No one. Thovian's eyes narrowed. "You forget your place, human. You are a servant, a guard dog. You do not decide what is reasonable." "Perhaps not." Marcus looked at Princess Elindra. His brown eyes met her golden ones, and she saw something there that made her breath catch. Not anger, not hatred, disappointment. "Your Highness," Marcus said formally, "I request reassignment from this post." Elindra felt the words like a physical blow. "What?" "I am formally requesting to be removed from your service." The court erupted in whispers. A guardian requesting reassignment was almost unheard of. It was considered a grave insult to the charge, an admission that they were not worth protecting. Thovian laughed with delight. "It seems your human has some pride after all, cousin, though not much sense. Does he not know what reassignment means for his career?" Elindra barely heard him. She was staring at Marcus, her mind racing. "You cannot do this," she said. "I did not give you permission to leave." "You are correct, Your Highness. You have the right to refuse my request." Marcus's voice remained calm. "But I am asking you not to." "Why?" The word came out before she could stop it. Because of some jokes, some teasing. I thought humans were supposed to be tough. Marcus was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft enough that only she could hear. I swore to protect your life, Your Highness, not my dignity. I have endured everything you and this court have done to me because my mission matters more than my pride. He paused. But a protector you do not respect is a protector you will not listen to when it matters. If danger comes, you will not trust my warnings. You will not follow my instructions. That makes me useless to you, and a liability to my mission. Elindra opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Marcus stepped back. Slowly, deliberately, he reached up and unclasped his chest armor. The sound of metal releasing echoed in the silent hall. He removed his shoulder guards, his arm bracers, his leg plates. Piece by piece, he set his armor on the marble floor. Beneath the armor, his black bodysuit was simple and worn. But what caught everyone's attention were the scars. They covered his arms, his neck, even his hands. Old wounds, healed but never hidden. Burns and cuts and marks that told a story of violence that no one in this crystal palace could imagine. Marcus stood before the court, not as a guardian in ceremonial armor, but as a man. A human man who had survived horrors and kept fighting. A man who had endured their mockery without complaint because he believed his mission was worth more than his pain. I have served the coalition for 18 years, he said quietly. I have protected senators and generals and children of diplomats. I have never once requested reassignment. He looked at Elindra one final time. But I cannot protect someone who sees me as less than a person. I am sorry, Your Highness. He bowed once, formally, correctly, with perfect respect, despite everything. Then he turned and walked out of the great hall. The doors closed behind him with a sound like thunder. And Princess Elindra stood frozen, surrounded by hundreds of nobles, feeling something she had never felt before in her young life. Shame. The feast continued after Marcus left. But Elindra could not enjoy it. She stood near the edge of the great hall, watching the nobles dance and laugh and drink. Prince Thovian was telling the story of the proud human to anyone who would listen. He made it sound like a great victory, like he had exposed the weakness of a primitive species. But Elindra noticed something strange. Not everyone was laughing. Some of the older nobles, military commanders, and council members who had lived through actual wars were quiet. They looked at each other with expressions that Elindra could not read. One of them, Admiral Sarath, shook his head slowly and walked away from Thovian's group without a word. Why? Elindra wondered. Why are they not amused? She thought about the scars on Marcus's arms. She thought about the way he had destroyed the training automaton, not with fancy techniques or psychic powers, but with brutal efficiency that spoke of years of real combat. She thought about his eyes when he looked at her before leaving, not angry, not hateful, disappointed. That word kept repeating in her mind. She had seen anger before. She had seen frustration, but disappointment was different. Disappointment meant that someone had expected better from her. Why would a human expect anything from a Valorian princess? Elindra left the feast early. She could not stand the noise anymore. Could not stand Thovian's cruel laughter or the way people looked at her with a mixture of pity and amusement. She walked through the crystal corridors of the palace, her footsteps echoing in the empty halls. Without thinking, she found herself heading toward her father's private chambers. The emperor was not at the feast. He rarely attended social functions these days. The war against the Hollow Syndicate took all of his attention. 2 guards stood outside his door. They bowed when they saw her. "I wish to speak with my father," Elindra said. "His Majesty is in a council meeting, Your Highness. He asked not to be disturbed. Tell him his daughter is here. Tell him it is important." The guards exchanged glances. One of them spoke quietly into a communication device. A moment later, the doors opened. Emperor Valorous sat behind his desk, surrounded by holographic displays showing troop movements and intelligence reports. He looked tired, more tired than Elindra had ever seen him. "Daughter," he said, "I heard about the incident at the feast." Elindra felt her cheeks burn. "Father, Sit down." His voice was not angry, it was cold, controlled. Somehow, that was worse. Elindra sat in the chair across from his desk. She felt like a child again, called to explain some mistake. "The human guardian has requested reassignment," the Emperor said. "I have denied his request." "You denied it?" "Yes." The Emperor's silver eyes studied her face. "Do you know why?" Because a guardian cannot simply leave? Because it would be an insult to our family?" "No." The Emperor pressed a button on his desk. The holographic displays changed, showing a new set of images: security footage, intelligence reports, medical files. "Do you know why I assigned a human to protect you?" he asked. Elindra shook her head slowly. "3 reasons." The Emperor held up one finger. "First, humans cannot be touched by the mind stream. Their minds are immune to psychic manipulation. In the past year, 2 members of our palace guard were compromised by the Hollow Syndicate. Their thoughts were slowly twisted until they became spies without even knowing it. A human guardian cannot be compromised in this way." He held up a second finger. "Second, humans are remarkably difficult to bribe or threaten. Their lifespans are short, which means they care less about long-term consequences. They form strong emotional bonds with their charges, which makes them resistant to outside influence. Sergeant Cole's psychological profile shows an unusually high loyalty rating even for a human." He held up a third finger. "Third, and most importantly, in the past year there have been 3 assassination attempts on your life." Elindra felt the world tilt beneath her. "What?" she whispered. 3 attempts. All stopped before you knew about them." The Emperor's expression did not change. "The Hollow Syndicate wants you as leverage against me. They have spent considerable resources trying to capture you." He gestured at the holographic displays. Images appeared. Dark figures in corridors, intercepted communications, weapons that had been confiscated. "The first attempt was stopped by our intelligence services. They intercepted a syndicate team 3 days before they reached the palace." Another image. "The second attempt was stopped by the palace guard. A servant had been compromised and was planning to let assassins into your chambers. He was arrested before he could act." Then a third image appeared. It showed a transport ship. Elindra recognized it as the vessel she had used to travel to the Summer Palace 6 months ago. The third attempt was stopped by Sergeant Cole. Elindra stared at the image. "I do not understand." "I was on that transport. Nothing happened." "Nothing happened because Sergeant Cole made sure of it." The Emperor pressed another button. The image changed to security footage from inside the transport's hangar. Elindra watched as a figure emerged from the shadows behind the transport. He was carrying a plasma rifle. He moved toward the ship with clear purpose. Then another figure appeared. Marcus Cole. The fight lasted less than 10 seconds. Marcus moved with the same brutal efficiency he had shown at the feast, but this time he was not fighting a training machine. He was fighting a professional assassin. The assassin fired once. The plasma bolt hit Marcus in the shoulder, spinning him around, but Marcus did not stop. He kept moving, kept fighting, until the assassin was on the ground. Then Marcus stood over the fallen man. One hand pressed against the wound in his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers. He looked at the transport where Elindra had been sleeping, unaware of any danger. He did not call for help. He did not seek medical attention. Instead, he dragged the unconscious assassin to a secure location, contacted Coalition intelligence, and only then allowed himself to be treated. The footage ended. Elindra realized that her hands were shaking. "He took a plasma bolt for me," she said quietly, "and he never told me." "He never told anyone," the Emperor replied. "I only learned about it when Coalition Intelligence shared their report. When I asked Sergeant Cole why he did not mention it, he said that protection should be invisible, that you should feel safe, not frightened." The Emperor leaned forward. "Do you understand now, daughter? This man has already bled for you. He has already risked his life to keep you safe, and you treated him like a servant. You mocked him in front of the entire court." Elindra felt tears burning in her eyes. She had not cried in years. Princesses did not cry. But the shame was overwhelming. "I did not know," she whispered. "That is not an excuse." The Emperor's voice was hard. "You did not treat him badly because you lacked information. You treated him badly because you believed he was beneath you, because he was human." Elindra wanted to argue. She wanted to defend herself, but she could not find the words, because her father was right. The Emperor stood and walked to the window. Outside, the twin moons of Valoria cast silver light across the crystal spires of the palace. "I'm going to tell you something that very few people know," he said quietly. "When I was young, younger than you are now, I believed exactly as you do. I thought humans were primitives, useful tools perhaps, but not worthy of respect." He turned to look at her. "Then the Kreth War happened. Do you know what saved our empire during the Kreth War?" Elindra shook her head. "Humans." The Emperor's voice was heavy with old memories. "The Kreth Horde was immune to psychic attacks. Our greatest warriors were helpless against them. Our technology was superior, but the Kreth did not care about losses. They just kept coming, wave after wave, until our armies broke." He paused. "The humans did not break. They held the line at Telos 4 for 47 days. 10,000 human soldiers against 1,000,000 Kreth. They knew they would die. They knew there was no rescue coming, but they fought anyway, because that gave our fleet time to regroup." The Emperor looked at his daughter with something she had never seen in his eyes before. "Sergeant Cole fought at Telos 4. He was one of the 600 humans who survived. He was 19 years old, barely more than a child by their standards." The Emperor shook his head slowly. "That man has seen more horror than you can imagine. He has lost friends, lost comrades, lost people he swore to protect, and yet he still chose to come here. He still chose to guard a princess who mocked him and humiliated him." "Why?" Elindra asked. "Why would he accept this assignment?" The Emperor was quiet for a long moment. "Because his last charge died," he said finally. "A young girl, the daughter of a human diplomat. Sergeant Cole arrived too late to save her. He spent 2 years in psychological recovery before returning to duty." Elindra felt her heart clench. "He requested this assignment because you are the same age she was when she died. He wanted a chance to—" The Emperor paused, searching for the right words. "To make things right. To prove to himself that he could still protect someone." The tears fell now. Elindra could not stop them. She thought about all the cruel words she had spoken, all the jokes at his expense, all the times she had made him stand in corners like a servant while she laughed with her friends. And all that time, Marcus Cole had been carrying the weight of a dead girl's memory. He had looked at Elindra and seen a chance at redemption, and she had given him only pain. "What do I do?" she whispered. "How do I fix this?" The Emperor looked at her for a long moment. Then slowly, his expression softened. "That is the first intelligent question you have asked all evening," he said. "I suggest you start by finding Sergeant Cole before he reaches the spaceport. His shuttle leaves in 3 hours. Elindra stood so quickly that her chair fell backward. "Thank you, Father." She ran from the room without waiting for his response. Elindra ran through the crystal corridors of the palace. Her formal gown was not made for running, but she did not care. She gathered the fabric in her hands and moved as fast as she could. The spaceport was on the other side of the palace grounds. If Marcus's shuttle was leaving in 3 hours, she still had time. She could find him. She could apologize. She could beg him to stay. She did not know exactly what she would say, but she knew she had to say something. The corridors were strangely empty. Most of the servants and guards were at the feast, attending to the nobles. Elindra's footsteps echoed against the crystal walls, the only sound in the silence. Then the lights went out. Elindra stopped. The darkness was sudden and complete. The crystal walls, which usually glowed with soft inner light, were black and cold. "Hello?" she called out. Her voice sounded small in the darkness. "Is anyone there?" No response. Elindra felt fear crawling up her spine. The palace had emergency power systems. The lights should never go completely dark. Something was very wrong. She reached for her communication device, a small crystal that connected to the palace security network. But when she activated it, there was only static. The communications are jammed, she realized. Someone has cut us off. Then she heard footsteps, not the quick steps of palace guards coming to help. These were slow, deliberate footsteps, the footsteps of hunters who knew their prey had nowhere to run. "Little princess," a voice called out from the darkness. It was a rough voice, filled with cruel amusement. "We have been waiting a long time to meet you." Elindra ran. She did not know where she was going. The darkness was disorienting, and she had never learned the palace's emergency routes. She had never needed to. She had always been safe. But she remembered something from her childhood. When she was very young, her nurse had shown her the servants' passages, hidden corridors that ran behind the main halls. The servants used them to move through the palace without being seen. Elindra found a wall panel and pressed it. The panel slid open, revealing a narrow passage. She slipped inside and pulled the panel closed behind her. The passage was even darker than the main corridor, but at least it was hidden. Elindra moved slowly, one hand on the wall, feeling her way forward. Behind her, she heard voices. "She went this way. Find her. The boss wants her alive," but he did not say anything about undamaged. Laughter. Cold, ugly laughter. Elindra pressed her hand against her mouth to stop herself from crying out. Her heart was beating so fast that she thought it might burst from her chest. "Father," she thought desperately, "someone, anyone, please help me." But she knew that help might not come. The communications were jammed. The guards were compromised. The palace was under attack, and no one even knew it. She was alone. The servants' passages led to the old communications tower. Elindra remembered this from her childhood explorations, a place she had been forbidden to visit, which made it fascinating to her younger self. The tower had its own power supply, its own communication systems. If she could reach it, she might be able to send a message. But who would she contact? The palace guard could not be trusted. Her father's personal guards were with him, on the other side of the palace. Then she thought of something. The human military frequency. Marcus had given her an emergency code during his first week of service. She had ignored it at the time, thinking she would never need help from a human. But she remembered the code. She had a perfect memory for numbers. "Please still be there," she prayed silently. "Please do not be on that shuttle yet." She reached the communications tower. The door was old and heavy, but it opened when she pushed. Inside, the emergency equipment was covered in dust. No one had used this room in decades. Elindra found the communication console. Her hands were shaking as she activated it. The screen flickered to life, casting pale blue light across her face. She entered the human military frequency. She entered the emergency code. Then she spoke. "This is Princess Elindra of the Valorian Empire. The palace is under attack. Guards are compromised. I am in the old communications tower. Please, please, if anyone can hear this." She paused. Her voice was breaking. Sergeant Cole, if you are listening, I am sorry. I am so sorry for everything, but I need help. Please. She ended the transmission. Then she heard the door behind her open. The man who entered the tower was tall and thin, with gray skin and black eyes. He was Thessian, one of the four-armed warriors that Aelindra had once wished for as a guardian. But this Thessian was not a protector. His smile was cruel and his hands held weapons. "Clever little princess," he said. "Finding this old tower. Sending a message." He shook his head slowly. "But who will answer? Your guards are sleeping. Your father is trapped in his chambers. And your human—" He laughed. "Your human walked away, left you alone, just like you deserve." Behind him, more figures appeared, 5 of them. Professional soldiers, armed and armored. Aelindra backed away until she hit the wall. There was nowhere left to run. "The Hollow Syndicate sends its regards," the Thessian said. "My name is Vorak. I will be taking you on a long journey, little princess. Your father will pay well for your return." His smile widened. Eventually, he stepped forward and grabbed her arm. His grip was like iron. "Please," Aelindra whispered. "Please do not do this." "Begging already?" Vorak laughed. "Good. I like it when they beg early. It saves time." He turned to his soldiers. "Secure the tower. We leave in 5 minutes. The extraction ship is—" He stopped. The lights had gone out again. Not just the tower lights. The stars themselves seemed to disappear outside the window. Something massive was blocking the sky. Then they all heard it. A sound like thunder. A sound like the end of the world. A human dropship descended through the clouds. It was not a normal military vessel. It was black and unmarked, with no identification codes. It moved fast, faster than anything that size should be able to move. It landed in the courtyard below the tower with a crash that shook the walls. Vorak's soldiers raised their weapons. "What is that? Who—" The tower door exploded inward. Marcus Cole stepped through the smoke. But this was not the Marcus that Aelindra knew. This was not the quiet guardian who stood in corners and endured her mockery in silence. This Marcus was wearing full combat armor, black and scarred and covered in marks that spoke of dozens of battles. His face was hidden behind a helmet that glowed with targeting systems. In his hands, he carried weapons that hummed with deadly energy. He looked like death itself. "Let her go," he said. His voice was calm, quiet, terrifying. Vorak laughed nervously. "1 human? Against 6 of us? You must be—" Marcus moved. Aelindra had seen Marcus fight before. She had watched him destroy the training automaton at the feast. She had thought that was impressive. She had been wrong. That had been a demonstration, a performance, a fraction of what he could do. This was the real thing. Marcus did not fight like a Valorian knight. He did not use elegant techniques or beautiful movements. He fought like a storm, like a natural disaster, like something that could not be stopped. The first soldier fell before anyone could react. The second and third fell together. The fourth managed to fire 1 shot before Marcus was on him. Vorak released Aelindra and raised all 4 of his arms, each one holding a weapon. He was a Thessian warrior, trained since birth in the art of combat. He had killed dozens of enemies in his career. He lasted 8 seconds against Marcus Cole. When it was over, Marcus stood in the center of the room, surrounded by fallen enemies. His armor was cracked in 3 places. Blood dripped from a wound on his leg. His breathing was heavy, but he was alive. And so was Aelindra. He turned to look at her. Behind his helmet, she could not see his face, but she could hear his voice, tired, pained, but somehow gentle. "Are you hurt, Your Highness?" Aelindra realized she was crying. She was shaking and crying, and she could not stop. "You came back," she whispered. "You came back for me." Marcus removed his helmet. His face was tired and pale, and there was a cut above his eye, but his expression was soft. "I never really left," he said. I was at the spaceport, close enough to respond. He paused. Just not close enough to see your face while I did my job. Elindra laughed. It was a broken sound, half sob and half laugh. I am sorry, she said. I am so sorry for everything. Marcus looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. I know, he said. We can talk about it later. Right now I need to get you somewhere safe. Can you walk? Elindra nodded. Marcus held out his hand. She took it. And together they walked out of the tower into the longest night of her life. The night was not over yet. Marcus led Elindra through the dark corridors of the palace. His hand held hers tightly, and she found comfort in that grip. It was warm and strong and real. Around them, the sounds of fighting echoed through the crystal halls. The Syndicate had sent a large force, at least 50 soldiers. They had expected an easy mission. They had expected compromised guards and a helpless princess. They had not expected Marcus Cole. Coalition reinforcements arrived within the hour. Human soldiers poured into the palace, working alongside the Valorian guards who had not been compromised. The battle was fierce but short. The Syndicate soldiers were professionals, but they were not prepared for a real fight. By the time the twin moons began to set, the palace was secure. Elindra sat in the medical wing wrapped in a blanket. She was not injured, not physically, but she could not stop shaking. Around her, doctors and nurses moved quickly, treating the wounded. There were many Valorian guards who had been hurt. There were also human soldiers who had taken injuries during the rescue. And there was Marcus. She watched as the medical team worked on him. He had taken 11 wounds during the night. 11. Plasma burns, blade cuts, and impact injuries. Any one of them could have been serious. Together they should have killed him. But Marcus was still alive, still conscious, still refusing to let them put him to sleep. I need to stay awake, she heard him say, until I know she is safe. Sergeant, you have lost a significant amount of blood. You need rest. I will rest when the princess is secure. The doctor sighed and continued working. Elindra stood up. Her legs were weak, but she forced them to move. She walked across the medical wing until she reached Marcus's bed. He looked up at her. His face was pale from blood loss, and there were dark circles under his eyes. But he still managed a small smile. Your Highness, you should be resting. So should you. Elindra sat down in the chair beside his bed. But you will not listen to the doctors. So I will stay here until you do. Marcus laughed softly. It turned into a cough. That is not necessary. I know. Elindra looked at her hands. Many things are not necessary. You coming back for me was not necessary. You taking 11 wounds for me was not necessary. She looked up at him. But you did it anyway. Marcus was quiet for a moment. It is my job, he said finally. No. Elindra shook her head. Your job ended when you walked out of that feast hall. You requested reassignment. You had every right to leave. Every reason to leave. Her voice cracked. After everything I did to you, why did you come back? Marcus looked at her for a long time. His brown eyes, those ordinary, human eyes that she had once thought were dull, held a depth of emotion that she had never noticed before. Because you are 16 years old, he said quietly. Because you were scared and alone and calling for help. Because... He paused, and something painful crossed his face. Because I made a promise to myself, not to your father, not to the coalition, to myself. What promise? That I would not lose another one. Elindra remembered what her father had told her. The young girl, the diplomat's daughter, the charge that Marcus had failed to save. The girl who died, she whispered. You blame yourself. I was 19 seconds late. Marcus's voice was heavy with old grief. 19 seconds. If I had been faster. If I had seen the signs earlier, if I had... He stopped and shook his head. She was 14 years old. She liked to read books about alien planets. She wanted to be an explorer when she grew up. Tears rolled down Elindra's cheeks. She did not try to stop them. "I am sorry," she said. "I am so sorry. Not just for tonight. For everything. For the way I treated you. For the things I said. For..." She struggled to find the right words. "For not seeing you as a person." Marcus reached out and took her hand. His grip was weak. He had lost too much blood, but it was gentle. "You are 16, he said again. "Cruelty from the young is not evil. It is just unfinished growth." He smiled faintly. "You have time to become better. That is more than many people get." Dawn came slowly. The twin suns of Valoria rose over the Crystal Palace, painting the damaged walls in shades of gold and pink. It was beautiful, despite everything. Life continued. Even after the darkest nights. Emperor Valoris came to the medical wing personally. He looked at his daughter, alive and unharmed, and something in his ancient eyes softened. "You are safe," he said. "That is all that matters." "Because of him." Elindra pointed to Marcus, who had finally fallen asleep. "He saved my life. Again." The Emperor looked at the sleeping human, this small, fragile creature who had done what no Valorian could do, who had walked through fire and pain and asked for nothing in return. "Yes," the Emperor said quietly. "He did." 1 week later, Princess Elindra stood before the Valorian High Council. She was nervous. She had never addressed the council before, but she had asked her father for this opportunity, and he had granted it. "Honored members of the council," she began. Her voice was stronger than she expected. "I come before you to make a request." The council members watched her with curious eyes. 1 week ago, I learned something important. I learned that I had been blind to the value of those I considered beneath me. Blind to the courage and sacrifice of people who did not look like us or think like us. She took a deep breath. "A human soldier saved my life. Not once, but multiple times. He took wounds that should have killed him. He returned for me when he had every reason to walk away. And he did it not for money or glory or advancement. He did it because he believed it was right." She looked at each council member in turn. "I am asking this council to formally recognize Sergeant Marcus Cole with the Star of Valoria, our highest honor for non-citizens. I am also asking that we begin negotiations with the Human Coalition for a formal alliance. Not a relationship of masters and servants, a true partnership of equals." Murmurs spread through the council chamber. One of the elder members spoke. "You ask us to treat humans as equals? They are primitives. They live barely a century. They cannot touch the mind stream." "No," Elindra agreed. "They cannot touch the mind stream. They cannot read minds or sense emotions or live for 800 years. She paused. "But they can do something we cannot. They can choose to protect people who have given them nothing but cruelty. They can choose to sacrifice themselves for strangers. They can choose to be better than their circumstances." She stood taller. "That is not primitive. That is extraordinary." The vote was close, but it passed. 3 months later, Princess Elindra stood at her father's side as he signed the Human-Valorian Alliance Treaty. It was the first true partnership between the two species, not a relationship of convenience, but a bond of mutual respect. Marcus Cole stood in the crowd, wearing his dress uniform. The Star of Valoria hung at his chest, a crystal medal that glowed with inner light. After the ceremony, Elindra found him. "You did not have to come," she said. "You were reassigned. You have new duties now." Marcus smiled. It was a real smile, warm and genuine. "I wanted to see it," he said. "I wanted to see what you became." Elindra looked at the treaty document. then back at Marcus. "You taught me something important," she said. "Something I will never forget." "What is that?" She reached up and touched the medal on his chest. "That true strength is not about power or psychic abilities or long life. It is about choosing to protect those who have not yet learned to protect themselves." Marcus shook his head slowly. "That is not a human trait, Your Highness. That is just a choice. Anyone can make it." Elindra smiled. "Then perhaps I will spend my life teaching others how to make that choice." "That," Marcus said, "sounds like a worthy goal for a future empress." Epilogue. 40 years later, Empress Elindra sat on the crystal throne of Valoria. She was no longer the spoiled princess who had mocked a human soldier at a feast. She was a wise ruler, beloved by her people and respected throughout the galaxy. At her coronation, she had worn a single piece of human jewelry, a battered metal insignia from a soldier's armor. She wore it still, on a chain around her neck. Marcus Cole had died peacefully 15 years ago, surrounded by friends and family. He had lived to see the Alliance grow strong. He had lived to see humans and Valorians fight side by side against common enemies. He had lived to see Elindra become everything he had believed she could be. At his funeral, Elindra had spoken the words that would be carved on his memorial. He taught an empire that true strength is found not in power, but in the choice to protect those who cannot protect themselves. And across the galaxy, other species learned what the Valorians had learned. Be careful how you treat the humans. Not because they will hurt you, but because even if you hurt them, they might just save you anyway. The end.